everyone, and welcome to Stan the Wine Man TV. I am your host, Stan Rattan, and this is the Blue Collar Wine Show, where not only do I help you spend your wine dollars wisely, I also help you learn about wineries and winemakers and all those cool sort of things. So today I'm very honored to have Andrew and Michael Januik here with me. Andrew and I did a tasting last month, and we talked about families and carrying on the tradition of making wine with the winery, and how in Europe it's just expected, but not so much in the United States. So we're going to talk a little bit about how this process happened, and we've already had a little bit of a discussion before we started shooting, so I have kind of an idea where this is going to go. But Mike, when you were raising your family and you had this winery, which you started in '99?
Started Januik in '99. Started making wine up here commercially in 1984.
84.
Yeah.
And you were the head winemaker at St. Michel for
All
10
the
years?
90s, yeah.
Yeah, 10 years or so.
Yeah. And then a few other places before that.
Yeah. One of them ended up being Snoqualmie, which St. Michel bought.
Yes, after, after I went to work for them.
Yeah, yeah. So Mike has a big history in winemaking in Washington State, and now Andrew has taken over the winemaking responsibilities at Januik and Novelty Hill. And you also have your Lady Hawk project, your Southern Sojourn project, all that.
Yep.
So, I guess to start, we'll start with Mike. Mike, when you were raising your kids, and you made a comment earlier, you didn't expect them to take over the winery.
No, there were no expectations on my part or my wife, their mother's part. We didn't think that far in advance. You know, like most parents, we just wanted them to pursue whatever was going to make them happy. Andrew started demonstrating an interest in the whole process at a pretty early age. When we started Januik in '99, I was making it in Walla Walla for the first few years at a friend's place. And both of our sons, Andrew and his brother Don, would come over and they'd help out. And they'd do things like rack wines. You were probably, in '99, I think you were probably about 11 or 12?
Yep, 12. Well, it's kind of started, yeah.
And his brother was about 15. And the thing that was kind of funny about that first experience, though, is that I was making it at Three Rivers Winery. And for anyone who knew it back then, like in 2001, I used the space for a couple of years, you'd know that they had a 3-hole golf course. And
really?
So, yes, right at the winery. And so these guys would be helping me, and all of a sudden I'd look around, and they weren't there anymore. They were out on the 3-hole golf course because they thought that sounded like as much fun as making wine. And so it took a lot of coaxing to get them back into the winery sometimes. But they did, and you know, when it was time to bottle wine and that sort of stuff, they were all there. And it was fun having them around. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, and you started making wine, you told me, how old were you?
Probably, so in high school, so probably, yeah. Yeah, I think we're past the statute of limitations on it. So yeah, in high school, probably around 16 years old, started making a little bit of rosé, just, 10 cases or so. Still have a few bottles floating around.
Do you really?
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
wow.
Yeah, that was over 20 years ago now, though, so it's some of the aging maybe hasn't been the best, but I'm still convinced it was pretty good at first. But
Created his own label.
yeah. Did the whole thing. Not quite fully sanctioned, but enough so.
It was home stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
you didn't put it in mason jars and put it in the back of your trunk.
Yeah,
And sell it to people.
Yeah, nothing commercial. I don't think my friends had enough money to actually buy it. So, yeah, but it is one of those things that's kind of counterintuitive, but in a lot of ways, the process and working in wineries is kind of conducive to when you're younger, just because it's very hands-on, and it takes, it's a good way to kind of, use your creativity and you're can be constantly doing things. So it's it was a fun way to spend summers. And then as we got a little bit older into high school and then college, coming back on weekends for harvest and whatnot.
Yeah. So what is it about your dad that you made you like, I really want to do this? I mean, what attributes of your dad attracted you to the actual winemaking?
I think as growing up and then, as I was getting older, deciding that I really was passionate about it and wanted to follow it as a career, I don't think either of us really had a moment where we thought, okay, this is happening. It was really something that just went over a longer stretch of time, and I think we both.
It evolved.
Yeah, and we both love science. We both there's a lot of problem solving involved with it, and I think in some ways, just we are similar in that we like kind of doing those kinds of things, but then also you of course are working with something that is so malleable and just interesting, and it was just once you start, it's hard to stop.
I totally understand. In fact, part of me wishes my family would have been involved in the wine world, because I would definitely be in it if they were, but it didn't happen.
Another thing for me that can't be overstated is the environment around the winery. I feel like I've got 50 children here. Because they could all be my children because I'm the oldest one here, and then Andrew's mother is right behind me, Carolyn, and so at least here there's a real sense of family and a lot of camaraderie, and I think maybe it's because of our personalities, but in the cellar there's just such a good feel. It's fun, and I both Don and Andrew have worked so many harvests and have worked themselves to the point of exhaustion, but that also creates a feeling of exhilaration, especially at the very end when you know that you're done.
The finish line is there.
Yeah, and he's right. I mean, I think both growing up and really just as much now, especially I think here in Washington State and the Columbia Valley, that there's so much community, not just within our own winery, but in the wineries and here in Woodinville, but in the state as a whole. It does feel like we're at such an exciting time that being a part of that is a draw. And like our winemaking team and production team, a bunch of us have been together for a long time, and it's we're like an old sports team that we got all these seasons together.
Yeah.
But every year's different, but also similarities, and it's just fun.
How was just not to sidetrack too much, but how was 2023 looking?
Great. I mean, the quality was very high intensity in the fruit. As always, there's always some bummer with those years where you get a little bit lower yield, which was what we had in 2023. I mean, the trade-off is that the quality is really high, so we'll take it. But there's a few things that we would have liked to have a little bit more of. But sometimes Mother Nature doesn't give you that, but it tastes great.
Yeah, good. I read a quote from Mike. He said, "We don't do cookbook winemaking. We let our brain tell us how the quality should be, how it should taste." Is that explain that approach?
No, that's accurate. Although I do love to cook, and I love to cook with wine, but we don't do any cookbooking when it comes to winemaking.
Do you even use a cookbook when you're cooking though?
Not no. It's more fun if you don't feel like you're following a recipe. It's more fun if you feel like you're basing it on all of these years of previous experience. And so for me, I fall back on 40 years of experience making wine. Some of it I can't even remember anymore. But all of that is there collectively somewhere in my brain. And it just, it's a very satisfying feeling to know that you've done something for that long and still feel like it's fun.
You do, and because that is a question that we'll hear from people when they come to the wineries asking if we follow a recipe and I think what we believe, and I think a lot of hopefully other wineries, is that the big difference is that every year your grapes are going to give you something different, even if there's some level of consistency compared to working with ingredients for cooking, where every year we'll see something that we've never seen before. So you have to be able to adjust based on what you're seeing in the vineyard, what you're tasting in the grapes, or once it's in the cellar, and kind of fall on people who've worked in the industry for years prior and ask for advice, or your own personal experience, and kind of make decisions based on that.
Yeah, that's really cool. I like that because I've met winemakers that are more technical, and to read that quote and say, hey, Mike goes in there, you go in there and you taste the wine, how it's developing, and you decide what you're going to do. And I noticed you also mentioned that you believe in shorter maceration times.
Yes. I've seen and I've done every amount of maceration you can imagine over 40 years. I've macerated for 45 days. I've macerated for 5 days. And our macerations are usually, 7 to 10 days, do you think?
Our 2023, our shortest was 7 days. Our longest was 22 days.
Wow.
So there's a range, like saying again, depending on what the fermentation's telling you, but yeah.
Right.
But I know that there are some people who believe that they should just macerate a certain amount of time, regardless of the grapes, and maybe it's 28 days. And that's kind of a standard, and I think part of that is a fallback on how things traditionally have been done in Bordeaux. But winemaking ultimately should be, to a certain extent, hedonistic. The wine has to taste good. You have to love the wine that you're making. And the other thing that's important is that you have to define the style of wine that you're making, and then be true to it. Because somebody who buys one of our wines this year, when they buy it next year with a different vintage, they're going to want it to be pretty similar. They don't want it to be all across the board. And so I learned early on that lesson. As a bit of history, I went to graduate school at UC Davis and got a master's degree in winemaking. And when I was there, we had a retired professor named Maynard Amory who came and talked to the class once. And that's the point that he made more than anything. And I will always remember it to this day. He said, decide on your style of wine and be true to that style. And I think we've been pretty good about that. And I think the best compliment that we get from people is somebody saying, we like your wine because we think it's consistently well made. It may not be the greatest wine ever, but I really feel like our wines are all consistently well made. And when people try them and they buy them, they're not going to be dissatisfied.
Yeah, that's a good point. I noticed that you had a wine shop in Ashland, Oregon, so you started off on the retail side a
Yes.
little bit?
Yeah, my wife and I moved from Seattle in 1978, fall of 1978. We were either going to Bend or to Ashland, and we were going to open a bookstore or a wine shop. And when we got to Portland, we kept going straight, and we...
The light came down, yeah, that's right.
And so we started a deli and a wine shop in an old defunct deli that was there. We had very little money. When we were done with the whole thing, we had very little money, but it was fun, and that was our first experience as small business people. And we had the perfect name for the shop too. We were the Merchant of Ashland.
That's pretty cool. So, what was I just thinking? I lost it. But so you started on the retail side. Oh, I know what it is. I was going to ask both of you. You know, when you're making wine, like when I'm buying wine at the store, I have to think in terms of, like, I have what I call a pick of the month. I put it at the end of the aisle every month, and we call it an 80% wine. In other words, I'm pretty sure 80% of the people that are going to buy it are going to like it. And after you've been in retail as long as I have, and selling wine as long as I have, you tend to understand people's palates. How much do you take that into play? Like I know there's a artistic and creative side of winemaking, but you also have the bottom line in your checkbook. So how do you think in terms of when you're making that wine, wanting to have it something that people will enjoy?
Yeah, what he was speaking to, and I think really is the overarching philosophy in a lot of ways, is we make wines that we want to drink. Of course we're drinking other people's wines, other people from this state, all over the world, but we also drink our wines a lot. We love our wines. And we have just kind of found that if we kind of keep making the wines that we like, that we have enough of a following that we don't have trouble selling it out. And that's kind of, it's simplistic, but we don't, when we're working on blends, or we're working on, tasting through fermentations, deciding when to separate from the skins, whatever the point may be, really we're having conversations about, how it's affecting our palate, what we're tasting, structurally, finish, all those things. But then we just also are speaking in the simplicity of, we like this. This is kind of what we think is the best thing for us for this wine, and we just decide based off of that. But I do think that, especially here in Washington State, where people are so loyal to these wines, we're finding that, that 80-20 rule kind of works pretty well for us also. Some wines more than others, but overall it's kind of how it works.
Yeah, because if you're a wine consumer, like you guys are, you kind of get an idea. Like, you probably have opened a few bottles of wine in your life that you go, ooh, I don't like this one.
And we like, I think both of us, we like clean wines, we like medium-bodied wines that are meant to be had with food, but also good. It's what we like to drink, even if we're not drinking our own. And I have no problem with other wines. I like to try, the whole spectrum, but we're not shooting for really austere, kind of out of the norm wines, because it's just kind of not what we actually like that much. So.
Yeah, and I know there's probably winemakers out there that do like that austere style, but they have to think in terms. I felt sorry for this one guy at Taste of Washington. He was just struggling talking to all the guys because his winery was starting to go out of business. He just couldn't sell his wine. So I tasted his wine, so he didn't say anything, but I understand why he wasn't, because they were really austere. They were really, not very approachable wines.
And the problem is, go ahead.
I was just going to say, Stan, because you're a little older, than Andrew, you may appreciate this more, but I think that what we've done as a group here at the winery is we've done a Vulcan mind meld with the vast majority of consumers. It's like we've somehow figured out that was a reference to Spock.
Oh, we know.
Okay, I was wondering. Maybe there's something
Star Trek.
Live long and prosper.
Yes.
Yeah, I guess.
Vulcan mind meld. Wow. And I just feel like we've connected with a large majority of consumers.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And I think they tell us that too. They don't say I've done a Vulcan mind meld with them, but
But it's also allowed us to continue to make more and more wine over the years, and we do it in a way that is controlled in our growth. So not only do we keep our quality, but hopefully every year we're improving our quality based on experimentation and best practices in the winery and all those things. But it also when you're making more, improving that quality, you also get it out to a broader set of people, which is for us exciting, and also doing it at a price that is reasonable.
Yes,
One
yes.
other thing I think is important is that we have access to some of the best grapes in the state, and I think that that's for a number of reasons. One is just long-term relationships. I've worked with some vineyards since the mid '80s, and so we have those personal relationships still, and Andrew has developed those relationships with them as well, and we also pay our grape bills every year too.
That's important. It's very important. Pay those bills or they're not going to sell you any wine. Now, you made a comment too one time, and I'll give both your thoughts on this. You said the more wines you make, different types of wines you make, the better you become a winemaker, because you're dealing with so many different varietals, it makes you a better winemaker. What are your feelings on that? I mean, that was a quote from you, Mike, so.
Well, I have always said that if I was relegated to making, doing 4 or 5 fermentations a year, that it would be pretty boring, because my background is doing a whole bunch more than that. When I was at St. Michel, we would do 1,500 to 2,000 fermentations a year. But even here, we do, 100 and, how many do you think we do?
This last year, probably about 160 different.
Gives you a lot more to work with, but the more opportunity that you have to work with different grapes doing multiple fermentations, the more you're going to learn from them. You just can't help but not learn.
Right.
That's a really good way to gain a lot of experience pretty quickly, and then over the years, it kind of becomes anecdotal. Your brain goes back to these different experiences that you've had during different harvests with different fruit and different fermentations. But as I've said, but if you only experience this 5 or 6 fermentations a year, the learning curve is going to be a lot steeper for a lot longer.
Makes sense.
And it's also one of the things that's so great about growing and making wine at the Columbia Valley is that because the Columbia Valley is, one, so much larger than most people realize, and also so much more unique in the sense of having different, soil types, different climates, different mesoclimates, different, grades, all these different things, that we're able to make so many different varieties, and then even different styles within those varieties because of all this uniqueness within the vineyards. So, yeah, I mean, if you have access to it, it seems like, I know there's a lot of wineries that, want to focus on one variety or just Bordeaux varieties or whatever it may be. For us, it's just more fun to do more because we have access to this great fruit that's all so different from each other.
Yeah, I know. Washington State is the coolest place ever because we can do so many varietals well. Like I just discovered Sage Rat wines, Dusty Jenkins from Gilbert Cellars. Fantastic wines, and he's concentrating on Barbera, Sangiovese, Italian varietals, although he scoots off into something else. Anyway, but Yakima Valley, so different than Red Mountain, so different from Walla Walla, so different from up Chelan.
Mm-hmm.
So you guys must have a good time with that.
Oh yeah, it does mean a lot of driving during harvest. So I think this past year we were sourced from about 21, maybe 22 different vineyards around the state. So it's all over the place, but it also gives us so much flexibility when it comes down to blending. Much later on in the process to have all these kind of unique components to work with.
Little micro.
For me, the other thing that's been interesting has been to see changes over the years because of changes in climate. There are sites that just generally tend to be warmer than they were 40 years ago, and our growing season tends to be warmer than it was then, and has had an effect on our winemaking and how we approach it.
Yeah, I'm sure it does. It's interesting to watch this. How I think they're starting to make wine in Ireland now.
Wow.
which speaks volumes
Yeah.
about
And I just read about a
That's
vineyard
amazing.
planted in England.
Oh, they're making a lot of quite a bit of sparkling wine. Yeah.
Yeah, in fact,
so-
some of the champagne houses are going to Sussex because the soil there is so close to the soil in Champagne that they're buying property there so they can start making. Because a little Champagne's warming up.
Yeah, and it's finally getting warm enough in parts of England that
They
it
can
makes
actually-
sense. I'm sure the price of land is a little bit more easy to handle than in Champagne.
I think winemakers are good adapters
Yeah.
to things that are going on in the world. I mean, look at what were we, minus 10 or 10 degrees
Mhm.
just about a week and a half ago, and now it's almost 50.
It's
It's crazy.
It is, and it's luckily because obviously we're making adjustments in the winemaking and on the production side, but just as critical are in the viticulture side where we really for the last 10, 11 harvests, really since 2013 on, it's been quite a bit warmer than really ever in the known winemaking life here.
Yeah.
So with a few of those years pretty extreme, and then we've just we've learned on the winemaking end and the viticulture end, like, hey, if we have this extreme heat, we are gonna need it to put more water on the vines.
Right.
Make sure that you're keeping their overall health. Like, I mean, luckily, even though the Columbia Valley is such a warm, dry region, luckily we have access to so much irrigation. So we have things that we can do, unlike a lot of places that wouldn't be able to.
Right, exactly. And then you started that project down in Chile and Argentina called Southern Sojourn.
Yep.
How did that develop?
Yeah, randomly. No, so I mean, after graduating from college, I right away, through college, I never stopped working in the industry for the winery, and then after with the time off, I'd spend it traveling through South and Central America, and then eventually kind of just thought, if I'm spending my time off doing this, let's try making some wine down there. So about a decade ago, this will be the 10th harvest down working in the Southern Hemisphere this year. Just got a job at a winery in Mendoza, Argentina through Juan Munoz Oca, who at the time was working, managing all the production for Columbia Crest. And he's from Argentina.
That's right.
And yeah, I went down there, and I mean, it's for people who've been there, it's hard not to just feel embraced by the country and by the people, and it was just an incredible 3-4 months of working there. And it was a hard vintage just because it was so wet and kind of nasty, and in some ways, if it's not your own wine, seeing hard vintages in some ways tells you more and is more interesting, a lot more to learn from those kinds of years. But even in that hard vintage, I really fell in love with fruit from this one place, the Uco Valley in Mendoza. Very, very high elevation, like now sourcing from about 4,000 feet up in the foothills of the Andes, and just really, really unique. So yeah, eventually, just kept making wine down the Southern Hemisphere, and eventually started making some of my own wine while making wine for other people still down there. And now, for the few years, I've been doing it for both Argentina and Chile. Because to get to Argentina, you always kind of have to go through Chile, and had a similar experience where just their wines are so different, so much cooler, more coastally influenced. So it always surprises people in a lot of ways. Wines in Argentina, and to me, are more similar to wines in the Columbia Valley than they are to wines in Chile, even though they're a 5-hour bus ride from each other. So so those wines are fresh. Lower alcohol, really acid-driven, bright. Again, incredible wines for food. And just kind of now it's the opposite harvesting season. So so go down in March or April, and then come back and just kind of keep doing it.
So you guys pop open some of those Southern Sojourn wines together and
Yeah.
try
Oh
them?
yeah.
Yeah. They're the great wines.
Yeah. I tried the Malbec about 2 weeks ago,
Oh, nice, great.
and that is the most interesting, complex. I did a little thing on TikTok. I said, guys, spend the money on it because it's going to take you days to drink this because you're going to be thinking about it so much.
It's a complete. People have this idea of Malbec or even Argentine Malbec, and then you know, we don't get a lot of access to those really high elevation wines, especially here on the West Coast. But they are, it's not what people expect when
No.
they think of Malbec. It's a very different kind of profile
Yeah.
and structure to it. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you know, Malbec to me, and then this is an interesting thing because this is what happened to Shiraz in Australia. People just got sick and tired of it
Yeah.
because they kind of made it became homogenous.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I wrote an article about 5 years ago that Argentina's got to be careful not to get into that situation where it's vanilla ice cream Malbec. And unfortunately, even today, you could take 8 Malbecs in the under 15 and under range, and they all taste the same.
Yeah.
So it was really refreshing. I mean, I've had other Malbecs, but that was one of the better ones I've had, and I think that'll age 20, 25 years.
Yeah, I think so. And I've had some of those older ones from around there, and they are, I mean, their wines are very, very ageable.
Yeah. Perfect with the Argentinian meat.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that is part of the problem with going down there every time. Definitely put on for a few kilos from all
Yeah.
the asados. Yeah.
So, Mike, how do you feel about aging wine? Is that something that is in your mindset, or because I know a lot of winemakers say, let's just drink it now. But
Well, as I age myself, I gain more and more of an appreciation for wine aging. And I'd like to hope that I'm as long-lived as some of the wines that we've made. I think that if you're making a wine that's well made, you should be able to enjoy it at a young age and enjoy it at 20 years or 25 years. There's no reason why it should be either or. Yeah, we go back and taste these wines of ours all the time that are 20 or 25 years old, and they taste good. They're different than a 2-year-old Cabernet, but I think we enjoy them all equally.
yeah,
But I think that's because we've taken an approach winemaking-wise that enables those wines to age well.
mm-hmm.
The wine doesn't have to be hard and astringent or whatever at a young age to age well, because we just don't make those super astringent hard wines.
Right,
But
right.
they still age quite well.
That's good. How far back does your library go here?
Back to 99.
99?
Well,
We got a lot of it. Yeah.
and I've got wines that go back to 84 that I made up here
Yeah.
commercially.
Yeah. Do you have any older Saint Michel wines that you